What's up guys, my name is Marc Steiner, and today we're going to be talking about the brand new Canon EOS RP. Before any of the rumors started about this camera, I thought that the next camera that Canon was going to release was going to be a more 5D Mark IV level mirrorless camera. But instead, they're kind of placing the R as not an entry-level camera anymore, but as their higher-end mirrorless camera, which doesn't really make sense to me because it doesn't compete with the higher-end mirrorless cameras out from Nikon and Sony. So now we're getting this brand new Canon EOS RP, this bare bones entry-level full-frame camera. And for the price, it's a very interesting camera. At $1,300, it's hard to say no to a full-frame body. With all these rumors swarming around, there were a lot of different price points, somewhere between $1,200 and $1,800, and I didn't think that Canon was going to come out with a camera that was that cheap for a full-frame camera. This is the cheapest brand new full-frame camera like pretty much ever made. So this is a very interesting price point. And who is this going to be for? I think this is more for the person who wants to get into more serious video, is kind of a hobbyist, pro-enthusiast, and instead of paying for a high-end crop sensor camera, they're going for an entry-level full-frame camera. And this competes well with like the Sony a6500. And this is a very interesting price point for a full-frame camera because of the fact that it's full frame. You don't see full frame cameras really sell for under $2,000. This camera probably is going to sell very well because of the fact that it's priced the way it is, and a lot of people who are looking to buy their first full frame camera or just buy their first camera might be very enticed by this price point. And if you're buying this camera for photos, I think this is a pretty decent pickup. It's competing well with the 6D Mark II. It has a nice flippy screen, which is really great for selfies as well as vlogging, and it competes decently well with the Canon EOS R for stills, at least in terms of image quality. This is the same sensor that is found in the 6D Mark II, so it's a 26 megapixel sensor. The autofocus system is not as good as the one on the R, but that's to be expected for the price. It only has one card slot, but again, for the price, you can't really argue with that. The one thing that I do think is a little bit weird about this camera is that it's using the battery from the M50, which doesn't really make sense to me because this is a full frame camera. It's going to take a lot more juice to power. Why didn't they use the same battery from the EOS R? That shouldn't be a feature reserved for higher end cameras if it's more or less the same form factor, you know? For stills, the image quality is great. If you're doing portraits or slow moving shots, you want photos of your kids, this is something that's going to be very helpful for a lot of people. If you want to shoot sports with this, you're not going to be able to do that because in continuous focusing, you're probably going to be getting between 2 and 3 frames per second, which is very slow, and even entry-level crop sensor DSLRs shoot faster than that, so that's really disappointing. Where Canon really crippled this camera, and I mean like really crippled this camera, was in the video. This camera doesn't even have 24 frames per second at 1080p, and that's just like a no-brainer. It has 30 frames per second and it has 60 frames per second. No 120, but I didn't expect that because Canon always cripples their cameras like that. But the lack of 24 is a very interesting omission from this camera because a lot of people like to shoot at 24 frames per second. You can shoot at 24 frames per second in the 4K video mode, but in 4K, you're getting a horrible crop like on the EOS R. And again, when you switch to 4K, you're lacking dual pixel autofocus and have to rely on contrast detect autofocus. That is a horrible autofocusing system that doesn't work, especially on this entry-level camera. Focusing is not good in 4K. So again, it feels like this is one of those cameras where Canon is saying, hey, we have a 4K vlogging camera, but no one's going to be able to use the 4K because it's not good. I was excited about this camera because of the price point and the fact that I could get into the Canon ecosystem without spending an arm and a leg, but I was more excited about the video capabilities through an external monitor, and that's something you have a lot of power over with the Canon EOS R. So I was really hoping you would have that functionality in this entry-level body. But if you have an external monitor, you don't really gain anything on this camera. You don't get C-Log, you don't get 10-bit, you don't get 422, you don't get ProRes. So there's no real reason for anyone to buy this camera in a professional manner because it's not going to benefit you. This is much more geared towards the entry-level enthusiast, pro-enthusiast level and it's not meant for professionals. Alongside this announcement of the RP, Canon also announced the development of 6 new lenses, and they all look amazing. These are going to be their L lenses for the EOS R system, and I'm very excited for these lenses. However, one of the issues with these lenses is that if you're buying a $1,300 camera, you're probably not going to want to spend $2,200 to $2,500 on a lens to go with it, and Canon doesn't have any prosumer or enthusiast level glass for their new lens mount right now. So if you want to buy a lens adapter and adapt previous glass that you already own, that's fine. But again, because of who this camera is geared for, a lot of people are going to be looking at this as their first camera, getting into a DSLR or mirrorless ecosystem for the first time. They probably don't have lenses, so they don't necessarily want to buy an old lens, an adapter, and then put that on a camera. It would just be much easier to buy a lens that's already compatible straight out of the box with their brand new camera, and they don't have any consumer level lenses with that right now. So what's the final verdict on the RP? I think this is a very interesting camera, and it's really interesting to see how much they undercut both Nikon and Sony and their own cameras with this price point of $1,300. This is a very interesting price point for a full frame body. I'm very excited to see whether or not this price point has an effect on the current market, because if Sony lowers their prices and Nikon lower their prices, that'll be very interesting to see, because if Canon is giving away a $1,300 camera, that means that more people are going to get into the Canon ecosystem and buy more expensive lenses down the road than they are with Sony and Nikon. So that's very interesting. However, if you're a professional and you're looking for a new camera, this is not the one. It's crippled in too many ways for you to be using this in a professional way. And I think that for a lot of people, this is just not what they want. Even the EOS R is crippled in a couple of ways, but you can still work it in a decent amount of professional settings, but not this. I was just very surprised to see that the Canon EOS R was not the entry-level camera anymore, that there was something below that. But here we are. I think that this camera will sell like hotcakes when the available lenses do come out at a more affordable price, but until then, I don't think many people are going to be picking this up. Alright guys, that's it for me. Let me know in the comment section down below. Are you excited about this camera? Are you intrigued? Are you thinking about buying one? Let me know. My name has been Marc Steiner, and I will see you next time.